What was your "I'm dating a freaking idiot" moment? Story 1. She had a new telescope and thought it would be really cute to check out the stars after a date one night. I don't remember the full conversation, but at some point, I joked about us being stuck together on this giant ball in space. She looked through the telescope again and said, "So you believe that, huh?" I just stared at her blankly because I was afraid of that question going any further. Anyways, happy to share that we didn't last long, but did you guys know that there's totally a lot of evidence that our planet is probably not round? Story 2. Senior year of high school, I'd been offered a full-ride college scholarship for athletics. My girlfriend at the time was always annoyed with how much time I dedicated to my sport. In a particular conversation, I made my case that without the sport, I probably wouldn't be able to go to college, and even if I could, I'd be riddled with debt. The scholarship was a life changer for me. She got mad that I called the scholarship a life changer and demanded that I quit my sport so we could hang out more. We broke up about 90 seconds after that comment. Story 3, I mentioned that I loved stargazing on camping trips because it would actually get dark enough to see the Milky Way. Apparently I was lying to him, as it's impossible to see the Milky Way since we're in it. Same dude also refused to believe that huckleberries existed. Again, this came up when I was talking about picking and eating huckleberries on a hike. He had to interrupt me to tell me I was wrong because huckleberries were made up. Everyone says dumb things sometimes. What was remarkable was how confidently he went out of his way to convince me I was wrong, wrongly. And then got upset at me for bickering when I didn't immediately agree that something I'd been looking at or eating for most of my life was in my imagination. Story 4. Dude, I was dating turned out to be the worst kind of know-it-all because his facts were mostly wrong. He told me not to tell him that because he doesn't like it, it's been done before, and it's not true. I hadn't encountered an incident of it yet, so I memorized that, but didn't think about it much, even if I thought it was weird to tell me that. Fast forward a few days, we were sitting at dinner at a restaurant, talking about whatever, when peripherally something about human organs floats by and that the pH of the stomach is about 3. He looks at me with a smile of deep condescension and says, "The pH of the stomach is 10. He said that so final and with such an air of superiority that I stopped mid-sentence. You don't want to be rude back, and mistakes happen anyway, so I tried to tell him politely that he might have a false memory there, or a teacher in his past might have mixed something up. I just didn't want to embarrass him more than he already did himself in public. But he was committed to this. I told him to please look it up, because I'm a biologist and I'm confident enough in my education. He did, and he was wrong. There were a couple similar incidents after this one. Hilariously, when we broke up, one of his gripes was, "I believe you think I'm stupid." In reality, it was that, and the fact he was not only wrong, but malicious and utterly confident in both. Story 5. Didn't date this guy. I worked with him. He was somehow a master electrician. He would say, "Be Pacific when you talk." We told him the word was specific. He said no. It's Pacific because of the ocean. We showed him online the definition of specific, and he legit said, anyone can fake an internet article. It was on Wikipedia. He also had a fiancée who ended up in the hospital for months, and he never once visited her. When I, a woman, asked him why not, he said, "She was on drugs and would never know I was there anyway." This woman wasn't in a coma. She had had a huge tumor removed and complications after, and yeah, she was on lots of meds, but she was awake most of the time. Dude couldn't figure out why she broke the engagement the minute she left the hospital. Story 6. I was in a long-term relationship with a girl while I was attending grad school, and we shared a studio apartment. One winter evening, I had planned to spend a late night at the school library doing some reading assignments, but was so exhausted that I decided to pack up and go home early. When I got home, I opened the door and immediately got hit by an overwhelming smell of gas. Turns out this girl had decided that she was cold, and the best way to heat up our apartment would be to turn the oven on and leave the oven door open, thinking the heat from the oven would warm the apartment. Did I mention the windows were completely shut and locked? I immediately opened the windows, got her out of the apartment, and called building management. She couldn't understand what the big deal was until I finally got through to her that she could have very well died of carbon monoxide poisoning had I not come home early that night. To top it off, she told me she had planned to light some candles. We broke up a few months later. Story 7. We were discussing the Syrian civil war, and she had just been shown some conference at the UN by an independent journalist. How Assad was democratically elected, and how this was all the US basically toppling a democratically elected regime. I eventually was able to get a brief look at this conference. Within 2 minutes, I could find that the reporter was independent, but almost entirely reported for RT, a wing of the Russian government. Also, it being at the UN just means she rented a room. The thing that finally made her realize was that Assad had won with a 90% vote. She was at least smart enough to know that was absurd. She was technically the smartest person I'd ever dated, and worked in a highly difficult medical specialist. But she was so comically gullible, combined with a complete lack of knowledge about the world. Story 8. I'd been dating a girl for a few months during the pandemic who forwarded me a load of WhatsApp messages about the dangers of 5G. It was a compilation of people saying their skin felt on fire, people attacking phone line installers, some dead birds in the road, and the obligatory idiots shouting, "I ain't seen nothing like this, it's the 5G man," and stating facts filmed from inside their car while smoking and barely being able to explain what 5G was. It had done the rounds between her friends who had all commented about how dangerous it was, despite them all having the latest iPhones, which was an oh no moment. She then started on anti-vax stuff saying COVID wasn't real, and she didn't need to get it despite being Indian and higher risk. The final, "I'm out," was where she said she'd never be an organ donor or give blood but would happily take someone else's. Also, she thought my cats would attack her, despite them trying to make friends with her. Story 9. X was living with a roommate who was a friend of our friend's and roommate's daughter. This roommate had been stealing money from X's cash stash in her room because the X noticed $20 equivalent of 1,000 Philippine pesos going missing every few weeks. I'd warned the X to get out of the place because that happens regularly, but she said that her roommate does so much for her, cooking, cleaning, laundry, that she viewed it as fine as long as it was every few weeks. Fast forward to a couple months later, they're locked out of their apartment due to non-payment of 3 months. X discovered this when she went home in between classes and the door was bolted and padlocked. She talked to the security guard who brought her to the manager, and the manager showed her promissory notes from each of the last 3 months. X was paying roommate her share of rent every month, so she freaked out. I told her if and when they opened the door, grab her shit and move out. Roommate messaged all of her family to get some funds together and get them all caught up so they could have a place to stay, and the X stayed along with them. She used the excuse that she just has so much stuff that it would be a hassle to move out. Next month rolls around, and they are locked out and kicked out for good. X played, "It was just so sudden. I didn't think they'd kick us out." So I told her to find a new place, away from roommate. She moved in with roommate to a new place, and we didn't talk for 2 months. Because I called her stupid because of that. Story 10. In college, I was sitting with friends, and a mutual friend asked her if she knew what the closest planet to the sun was. And after thinking about it hard, she asked me if the moon was closer to the sun than the Earth was, and eventually responded with Mars. I then asked to say the planets in order from closest to furthest, and she said it was Mars, the moon, Earth, then Jupiter. I thought that maybe me knowing the planets might just be because I was really into space, and I'd begun asking other friends that question, and I had a mixed response, but after trying to teach her about the solar system, she would constantly tell me she didn't believe it. Because if gravity was what was making them go around the sun, they would just fall onto each other. And absolutely no amount of explanation of orbits from me or videos I showed her were being absorbed into her head. It was so frustrating, and I couldn't understand how she couldn't understand. She was also highly skeptical about the Big Bang, black holes, galaxies, and other astronomical objects existing, etc., constantly saying that scientists have never been there, and they're making it up. Although we didn't break up over this, nor do I think it harmed our relationship in any massive way. I'm assuming because we dated for a further 5 months until something else happened. I do very clearly remember thinking, if we have kids, I can't let her ignorance affect them.